Let me ask you something. Have you ever had that gut feeling that something's just off? But when you bring it up, they say something that makes you second guess yourself. The truth is, cheaters rarely get caught because of what they do. They get caught because of what they say first. And if you know what to listen for, you'll spot the red flags before they become heartbreak. So pay close attention, because in today's video, I'm going to reveal the 6 phrases cheaters almost always say first and what they really mean. And at first glance, it sounds harmless, even caring. Someone saying this might seem like they're trying to calm you down, to ease your mind. But when this phrase shows up in the context of suspicion or gut instinct, it's rarely about comfort. It's about control. Specifically, emotional control. Imagine this: you notice a shift in your partner's behavior. They're on their phone more, they're less present. The warmth has cooled just slightly, not enough to accuse them of anything, but just enough to feel it in your bones. You say something. Maybe you ask a simple question: is something going on? And the response comes back, quick and dismissive. You're overthinking it. What just happened? That phrase didn't address your concern. It didn't offer clarity, context, or reassurance. Instead, it told you that the real problem isn't what they're doing. It's how you're interpreting it. It flips the script and puts the spotlight back on you. Suddenly, you're not the person noticing a red flag. You're the one creating drama. This is what makes it so dangerous, because it's not an obvious lie. It's a psychological maneuver. It's gaslighting disguised as comfort. And it's one of the most common ways cheaters and emotionally unavailable people keep someone close while dodging accountability. When someone tells you you're overthinking, they're really saying, I don't want to answer that. It's easier to dismiss your intuition than to be honest. And here's the twist. They often say it with a tone that makes you feel like you're the one hurting the relationship. They may even follow it up with, why do you always assume the worst? Or, you're being insecure. Now, instead of holding them accountable, you're defending yourself for feeling something. But let's break this down even further. Why would someone say this phrase if they have nothing to hide? The truth is, people who value connection, who are invested in your peace of mind, don't shut down your feelings. They lean into them. If someone truly had nothing to hide, they'd respond with curiosity or concern. They'd say, what's making you feel that way? Or, let's talk about it. They wouldn't invalidate the question altogether. Cheaters and manipulators know that the first line of defense isn't denial. It's doubt. If they can make you doubt yourself, they don't even need to lie effectively. You'll do the emotional heavy lifting for them. You'll walk away thinking, maybe I am overthinking this, and they can keep doing whatever it is they don't want you to find out about. Now, does that mean everyone who says you're overthinking it is automatically cheating? No, context matters, but it's a massive red flag when it's used repeatedly, especially when it shows up during moments of emotional vulnerability or suspicion. If your concerns are consistently met with dismissal instead of dialogue, that's not just a relationship issue. That's a trust issue. The key is to pay attention to the pattern. One instance may be an attempt to soothe you, but a pattern of dismissal, that's someone trying to keep you emotionally off balance. Cheaters don't always hide in the shadows. Sometimes, they hide behind your own doubt, and they use your love, your empathy, and your desire to keep the peace as the perfect shield. And that's why you're overthinking it isn't just a throwaway line. It's a signal, one you should never ignore. Why don't you trust me? At first, this question sounds valid, even heartbreaking. Someone looks at you, maybe with hurt in their eyes, and says, why don't you trust me? It makes you pause. It makes you question whether you've been unfair, too suspicious, or too guarded. But underneath the surface of that innocent sounding question lies something much more manipulative, a deflection. When someone says, why don't you trust me? In response to your concern or suspicion, What they're really doing is flipping the power dynamic. You started the conversation trying to understand their behavior, but suddenly, you're being asked to justify your feelings. Now you're on trial. You're being asked to defend your emotional reaction instead of them having to explain their actions. That's not communication. That's deflection, and more often than not, when it's used by someone who's cheating or hiding something, it's a tactic designed to shut down the conversation entirely. Because if they can get you wrapped up in guilt over not trusting them, they never actually have to provide answers. They never have to explain why they've been distant, why they're suddenly protective of their phone, or why their stories aren't lining up. Instead, they get to act hurt. And let's be honest, when someone we love acts hurt, we soften, we backpedal, we start thinking, maybe I'm being too much, or I don't want to push them away. And that's exactly the trap. This question, why don't you trust me, works especially well on empathetic people. If you're someone who leads with your heart, who wants to believe in the best in others, you're the perfect target for this kind of emotional sleight of hand. You don't want to feel like the paranoid one. You don't want to be the insecure partner. So you second guess your instincts in the name of keeping the peace. But here's the hard truth: trust isn't given automatically. It's built, and it's maintained through consistent actions. If someone is genuinely trustworthy, they're not offended by your questions. They're responsive to them. They understand that trust isn't a badge you wear to avoid scrutiny. It's something you protect and nurture and show up for. Someone who truly values the relationship doesn't ask, "Why don't you trust me?" with wounded pride. They ask, "What can I do to help rebuild your trust?" That's the difference between someone who wants to protect you and someone who just wants to protect themselves from being exposed. The question itself also plays into shame. It implies that the very act of questioning is wrong, but questioning isn't wrong. Feeling suspicious when something feels off isn't toxic, it's healthy. It means you're tuned into your emotional environment, and when someone uses your concern against you, when they turn it into a conversation about your lack of trust, rather than their lack of transparency, that's not emotional maturity, that's manipulation. Let's say you bring up that your partner has been texting someone late at night, and their response isn't to explain or comfort or clarify. It's, "Why don't you trust me?" That's not an answer. It's a diversion. And when people don't want to answer, it's usually because they can't do so without revealing the truth. Trust isn't just about believing in someone blindly. It's about how they respond when your belief in them is tested. Do they open up and engage with your concern? Or do they shut you down and make you feel guilty for even having one? That's where the truth lies, not in their question, but in how they handle yours. "She's just a friend." There's a reason this phrase is practically a cliché in relationships, because it's been used so many times to cover up behavior that crosses boundaries. On its own, it sounds innocent. After all, everyone is allowed to have friends, right? But the way it's said, and when it's said, makes all the difference. When someone says, "She's just a friend," in response to a genuine concern, it's often not about clarifying the relationship. It's about shutting the conversation down before it even begins. Let's look at the context where this phrase usually shows up. You've noticed a change. Maybe they're texting her a little too often. Maybe the way they talk about her has shifted. There's a certain energy in the tone, an eagerness, a spark that didn't used to be there. Maybe you notice they're spending time together more frequently, or they downplay it when you ask. So, naturally, you bring it up. You say, "Hey, is there something going on between you two?" And the response comes back quick, with just a hint of defensiveness. "She's just a friend." That should be the beginning of a conversation, not the end of one. But when someone uses that phrase as a wall instead of a bridge, it becomes a tool for avoiding accountability. It's meant to make you feel like you're being unreasonable like your suspicion is coming out of nowhere. But here's the reality. People don't usually ask those questions unless they're feeling something, and they deserve an answer that's deeper than a quick dismissal. There's also the unspoken implication behind those 4 words. You're being jealous. It's rarely said directly, but it's there in the tone. It turns your concern into an accusation, as if you're the one being unfair for noticing that something feels off. It makes you second-guess your instincts, as if seeing something wrong means there must be something wrong with you. But let's be real. There's a big difference between a platonic friendship and an emotional entanglement. People in committed relationships can absolutely have close friendships with the opposite sex. But when those friendships start to take emotional energy away from the relationship, when someone else is getting the time, attention, an emotional connection that should be reserved for you, it's not just friendship anymore. It's something else. And if you're picking up on that, you're not crazy. You're paying attention. The truth is, people who have nothing to hide don't rely on vague answers. They offer clarity. They show you where the boundaries are. They're open about the nature of their relationships because they want you to feel secure. They don't need to defend the friendship. They just explain it in a way that makes you feel safe and included. If you're getting vague answers, secretive behavior, or even irritation when you ask, that's a sign that the situation isn't as innocent as they claim. She's just a friend becomes especially concerning when it's part of a pattern, secrecy around messages, constant communication at odd hours, or defensiveness when you express discomfort. Those aren't the behaviors of someone who's protecting a friendship. They're the behaviors of someone protecting a potential exit strategy. When you love someone and you sense that something is off, the least they owe you is honesty. And if someone can't offer that, if they hide behind short phrases and act like you're the problem for even asking, then the issue isn't your question. The issue is what they don't want you to find. Because just friends don't require this much hiding, and real relationships don't thrive in emotional gray zones. You're too sensitive. This phrase might seem like a comment about emotions, but it's actually a power move. It's subtle, disarming, and incredibly common among people trying to deflect responsibility, especially cheaters. When someone says, "You're too sensitive," they're not just brushing off what you're feeling. They're reframing the entire situation to make it about your reaction, not their behavior. It's emotional manipulation wrapped in false concern, and it's one of the most effective ways someone can invalidate your experience without technically saying anything cruel. Imagine this. You've noticed something that hurts. Maybe it's a flirty message they sent to someone else. Maybe it's the way they downplayed something important to you in front of others, or how their attention has clearly shifted lately. You bring it up, calmly, respectfully, hoping to have an honest conversation. But instead of addressing your concern, they look at you and say, "You're being too sensitive." In that moment, the attention shifts. Suddenly, it's not about what they did. It's about how you responded. It's no longer a conversation about respect or honesty. Now you're defending your right to feel the way you do. That's the manipulation. That's the moment they begin rewriting the narrative to suit them. The phrase works because it puts you on the defensive. No one wants to be too needy, too dramatic, too emotional. So when someone tells you you're too sensitive, it triggers a sense of shame. You start to question yourself. Am I overreacting? Did I misread the situation? Am I being unreasonable? And while you're stuck second, guessing yourself, they're off the hook. They never had to explain, take responsibility, or even engage. It's a strategy rooted in subtle control. If they can make you believe that your emotions are the real problem, then they never have to confront the discomfort of their own actions. It allows them to cheat, lie, or break your trust, and then paint you as the one who's out of line for caring too much. It's not just invalidation, it's a quiet form of gaslighting. Healthy people in healthy relationships don't weaponize your feelings. When you say, "That hurt me," a partner who cares doesn't say, "You're too sensitive." They say, "I didn't realize. Tell me more." They stay in the conversation. They don't rush to escape accountability by making it about your emotional state. In fact, your sensitivity, your ability to notice emotional shifts and speak up about them, is a strength, not a flaw. It means you're present. It means you're paying attention to what matters. But cheaters rely on you not trusting that. They need you to doubt your perception. The more you question your own emotional responses, the easier it is for them to move in the shadows. If they can train you to believe that your hurt is always an overreaction, then they can continue crossing lines, emotional or physical, without ever being called out for it. That's the game. What's important to recognize is that emotions don't come out of nowhere. People don't just feel things for no reason. When something hurts, it's usually because a boundary has been crossed or a value has been betrayed. Your sensitivity isn't the issue. It's the alarm system, and someone who truly respects you will never tell you to turn that alarm off so they can move around unchecked. When a person minimizes your emotions, what they're really saying is, "My comfort matters more than your truth." And if that's the dynamic, it's not love. It's self-preservation at your expense. "I didn't want to hurt you." At first, it sounds like an apology. It seems gentle, even remorseful. But when you take a closer look, this phrase often reveals more about the speaker's guilt than it does about any genuine regret. When someone says, "I didn't want to hurt you," especially after they've been caught cheating, what they're really saying is, "I knew this would hurt you, but I did it anyway, and now I feel bad about how it makes me look." It's not about your pain. It's about their discomfort in the aftermath. This phrase usually comes at a vulnerable moment. The truth is out. You've seen the messages, caught the lies, or maybe they finally confessed because they had no other choice. You're raw. You're reeling. And instead of taking full ownership, they give you that line, "I didn't want to hurt you," as if their intention somehow softens the impact of the betrayal. As if what matters now is whether or not they meant to break your heart, rather than the fact that they actually did. It's a distraction. It shifts the focus away from what they chose to do and places it on what they didn't intend. But cheating isn't an accident. It's not a slip of the tongue or a moment of forgetfulness. It's a series of decisions. Texts that shouldn't have been sent, meet-ups that crossed a line, truths that were deliberately hidden. So when someone says, "I didn't want to hurt you," what they're really doing is distancing themselves from the consequences of their own choices. This phrase is also carefully constructed to preserve a sense of moral high ground. It paints them as someone who cares, who never meant for things to go this far. And maybe that's true on some level. Maybe they didn't set out to betray you. But the fact that they're now prioritizing how they feel about hurting you, instead of focusing on what they've done to you, reveals where their attention really lies, with themselves. In many cases, this line is meant to soften your reaction, to keep you from seeing the betrayal for what it is. It's a way of saying, "Don't be too mad at me. I had good intentions." But the pain of betrayal doesn't come from a lack of good intentions. It comes from a lack of integrity. And no amount of, "I didn't mean to," can undo the fact that trust was broken with full awareness of the potential consequences. People who are truly sorry don't center their apology around how the situation made them feel. They don't stop at, "I didn't want to hurt you." They go further. They say, "I hurt you, and I own that. I take full responsibility for the pain I've caused." Because genuine remorse is action-oriented. It looks inward, it reflects, it commits to change. It doesn't hide behind intentions that never matched the behavior. And let's not forget, if they truly didn't want to hurt you, they would have made different choices. They would have thought about you in the moment it mattered, not after the damage was already done. So when someone uses this phrase as their first line of defense, what they're really doing is protecting their image, not healing your heart. That's why it's so important to listen carefully to what people say in the aftermath of betrayal. Because sometimes, what sounds like compassion is really just a cover. "I didn't want to hurt you" might sound caring, but more often, it's the clearest sign that they were never thinking about you in the first place. "I made a mistake." This line is probably the most common phrase used by someone after they've been caught cheating. It's simple, it's familiar, and it sounds humble, like they're taking responsibility. But underneath that apology, there's usually a deeper attempt to reduce the seriousness of what actually happened. Saying, "I made a mistake," shrinks the betrayal into something momentary, accidental, even forgivable. It's a way of smoothing over a series of conscious choices by labeling them as one bad move. Cheating isn't just a mistake. A mistake is locking your keys in the car. A mistake is forgetting someone's birthday or typing the wrong email address. Cheating involves deception, planning, and sustained dishonesty. It doesn't just happen, it builds. First with the decision to hide something, then to continue doing it, and finally to lie about it when asked. Calling that process a mistake is like setting a house on fire and then saying, "Oops, I knocked over a candle." It's an oversimplification that hides intent behind a curtain of regret. What makes this phrase so emotionally manipulative is that it allows the person who cheated to skip over the part where they have to explain the why. It's a shortcut apology, something that sounds like accountability without actually digging into the roots of the behavior. And if they don't have to explain it, they don't have to examine it. That's convenient for them, but dangerous for you, because it leaves you without answers. It leaves you trying to make peace with something you don't even fully understand. People use the word mistake because it makes them look human, vulnerable. It triggers your empathy. They know you care about them, and they're counting on that. If they say it was just a mistake, they're hoping you'll think, "Well, we all make mistakes. Maybe I should forgive this one." But here's the hard truth. Most of the time, what they call a mistake was actually a decision they made multiple times, hoping they wouldn't get caught. And that's not a moment of weakness. That's a pattern of behavior. Another reason people fall back on this phrase is because it softens the moral impact. Mistake implies that something went wrong unintentionally. It makes it sound like the situation spiraled out of their control, rather than being something they chose. But cheating doesn't happen in a fog. They knew what they were doing. They just didn't expect the consequences to show up so clearly. Once they do, it's far easier to say, "I made a mistake," than to say, "I acted selfishly, I betrayed you, and I lied." If someone is truly remorseful, they don't hide behind phrases. They face the weight of what they've done. They don't just say it was a mistake. They walk you through their mindset, their failure to communicate, the choices they made, and what they're going to do to earn back your trust. Real accountability is uncomfortable, it's vulnerable, and it never sounds like a line pulled from a script. When you hear, "I made a mistake," don't just accept it at face value. Ask yourself, was this mistake a one-time lapse in judgment, or the final step in a long chain of disrespect? Are they taking full ownership, or just trying to minimize the damage? Are they doing the work to rebuild trust, or hoping that one sentence will be enough to move past the pain? Because the truth is, cheaters rarely start with deep honesty. They start with soft phrases, familiar lines, and surface-level apologies. And "I made a mistake" is one of the safest shields they can hide behind. But safety for them can mean confusion and heartbreak for you, especially if you take their words as the whole story when it's really just the beginning. The truth is, cheaters rarely start by showing you who they are. They start by saying the right things to keep you from seeing it. These phrases, "You're overthinking it," "Why don't you trust me?" "She's just a friend," "You're too sensitive," "I didn't want to hurt you," and "I made a mistake." They're not random. They're rehearsed. They're emotional pressure points designed to shut you down, not open things up. But here's what you need to remember. Someone who's honest, someone who truly loves you, doesn't make you feel crazy for asking questions. They don't punish you for noticing what's wrong. They invite clarity. They invite connection. And when they mess up, because we all do, they don't hide behind soft excuses. They stand up and take responsibility with their actions, not just their words. So if you've heard these lines, don't ignore them. Don't rush to explain them away. Trust your gut. Listen to what your intuition is telling you. Because the words people use, especially when they're under pressure, will either reveal their character or expose their cover. And you deserve more than someone who makes you doubt your own instincts. You deserve someone whose words match their behavior, someone who makes you feel safe, seen, and secure. Anything less isn't love, it's damage control. You're not too much. You're not overreacting. You're not the problem. You're just finally seeing the truth. And that's the most powerful place to start.